Okay, we are recording. I guess maybe we should wait another minute for people to join.
Thank you guys for doing this.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of things that are probably just going to be review for people. But hopefully everyone will learn something new, and this will be recorded so you can look back to it. And also we'll send out the slideshow too, which has a few links on it, and just generally good information.
And we're not going to
talk.
We're not going to talk for the whole time. So we're hoping that folks have questions about specific situations that we can answer.
We are going to breeze through a lot of stuff though. So if you do have questions, either maybe like write them down or put them in the chat and we'll get to it after. So, and Isabel, if you have questions and then you have to leave.
Well, you guys know I'm going to have questions because this is completely, but I'm excited y'all are doing, I won't ask questions because I'm coming from this has nothing to do with but I have always been curious how everybody else is, how everything works. So
yeah, we know there's a lot of different levels of this stuff. So hopefully we don't bore too many people or don't confuse too many people.
And I'm always game for learning something new. So I'm excited thank you guys for doing this.
Awesome. Of course. All right. Well, I think we can probably get started. I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, I guess we'll get started. So welcome everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm going to turn off my video of myself so I'm not distracted by it. So yeah, we just want to, the main goal here is to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of best practices for gathering audio, and to address some common problems that we see in people's, or that we hear in people's audio. Not necessarily frequently here at KUT. You'll hear some examples that are not from KUT, so we're not going to put anybody on the spot here. But again, if you have questions about any of this stuff, please put them in the chat or write them down. We're hopefully not going to talk for any more than 20, 25 minutes, and then we'll start, we'll do some Q&A type stuff. So thanks for being here. All right. Let's just talk about basic audio recording. All right, like it says here, you can do a lot of stuff to clean up your tape after you gather it, but you can't fix everything. So we're going to talk about some of the things that you can avoid doing in the tape gathering process so that you don't have to spend as much time cleaning it up. And some of that stuff is going to be unfixable, so you can avoid some common recording problems that you actually hear on the air sometimes because it's just unfixable. So the point that I want to stress is that all of this begins with the recording part. If you get bad recordings in the first place, you're going to wind up with a bad product. So the best recording that you can get, that's how you're going to wind up with the best final product that is possible. Garbage in, garbage out. And so why is it important to get good audio? Because the listener hears your bad audio. I mean, that's how they're experiencing your audio story. So you need to make it easy on them so that they pay attention. They don't get distracted by strange things in your recording, strange sounds in your recording. They might, they might hear something happening in the background. They might hear a bunch of mic handling noise, things that are distracting to them. And so they're not paying attention to the content. So you want to make sure that they're paying attention to the content as much as possible. So when you're recording, there is the number one rule is always wear your headphones. Most people who work in the newsroom know this because I've said this a lot. Other people have probably said this to them a lot, but the number one rule of recording is to always wear your headphones. If you don't wear your headphones, you don't know what you're recording. And so It would be like taking a photograph without looking through the viewfinder of the camera. You have no idea what is actually in the frame, what's out of the frame, what is in focus, what is not. So you need to wear your headphones in order to know what you're actually recording and what you're going to wind up with on tape. Headphones. Boom. So recording basics. These are a couple of the things that lead to problems down the line, and things that are very simple to address up front. I know most of you probably, at least most of you in the newsroom probably know all about this stuff because we've all talked about it a lot. You probably learned this stuff in the beginning, but it doesn't mean that issues don't still arise around this stuff. So let's talk about levels just for a second. So you want to set your levels on your recorder so that the person talking, the person you're interviewing, or whatever sound you're hearing you want the levels to be bouncing between -12 and -6 on the VU meter. That picture there shows, approximately where you want your levels to be on average. Sometimes it's going to be lower, sometimes it's going to be higher, but that's about where you want it on average. This basically leaves enough headroom so that if something gets louder, if somebody, raises their voice to make a point, then it's not going to distort, and the tape is still going to sound usable in that instance when it gets louder. And this also means that it will be loud enough when you get it into Audition and start actually editing stuff, that you don't have to turn the volume on your file up, which is going to lead to some hiss in your tape, because basically, whenever you record something, there is a level of noise that comes along with that recording. So if you have to turn the volume on what you recorded way up, you're also turning that hiss way up. And so that's going to get you that sort of sound in your tape, which you want to avoid because it doesn't sound great. Second thing is mic placement. So like in the photo, you don't want to put the mic directly in front of someone's mouth. This will lead to pee-pops. This will lead to, can lead to sibilance, things like that. Really exaggerated S's and things like that. So you want it to be diagonal and to the side and a couple inches away. This will make sure that the person sounds on mic, or that you sound on mic. And that you sound really present in the recording. Because if you sound far away, like if you put it, if you put the mic a foot away from them or 2 feet away from them, they'll sound distanced from the mic. So it's not like the person is hearing them intimately. They're hearing them from across the room, essentially. Room tone. This is important when you're doing field recordings. Make sure that you're recording at least a minute of silence, just so that you can get the sound of whatever room you're recording in or whatever space you're recording in. If things are happening, obviously you want to get a lot more than just a minute. If there's construction equipment and, all kinds of things happening in the background, and especially if it's germane to the story, then you want to get as much of that stuff as possible. But even if you're in a quiet room, you want to get 1 minute of room tone just to, you'll use that in editing later, and we'll get to that later, but basically you use it to mask edits in your tape. So like if you cut from something that someone is saying to another thing that they're saying and cut out something in between, then you use that room tone to mask that transition. All right, recording yourself at home. 2 common problems that I hear in people's narration that they're recording at home. Their rooms are echoey and their rooms are noisy. So basically, there's a couple of solutions here. If you're in an echoey room, chances are it's in a room where most rooms produce some kind of echo, because most rooms are square or rectangular. So the sound waves bounce off the walls, which are typically covered with hard surfaces, which reflect sound. So you basically want to put yourself in a smushy room. So if you can use a closet or something like that that has like cloth, clothes hanging in it, that'll absorb a lot of that reflection. that sound reflection. Or if you could just put a blanket over your head if you don't have access to a closet, or like you can see here, I'll often put just like a pillow behind the microphone to absorb some of the sound that would otherwise be reflected off the wall that's behind my microphone. So, I mean, you can go nuts with this. You know, I know some people have like built little boxes that they get inside, almost that they put their head inside with their microphone. But you can also do this very simply. It doesn't have to be complicated. Noisy rooms, just pay attention to the things that are in the background. Turn off fans, close your windows. You can probably hear my dog scratching around in here, trying to get out. Get rid of the dog, not permanently, but get him out of the room. Turn off heaters and AC, all that stuff. Just take a moment, be quiet, listen to what's in the room, and try to reduce those extraneous noises as much as possible. All right, recording phone calls at home. So this image is how I record phone calls at home. I recommend recording into your recorder rather than recording into your computer. Recording into the recorder just gives you more flexibility and more control over what's going onto the tape. I know some people probably have like mixers and stuff. We're going to keep it simple for right now. But basically, I've got the phone coming out of the headphone jack and going into one side of the recorder. I've got my microphone going into the other side of the recorder so that I can record my side of the call too. And then I'm listening to what's happening. I've got the headphones plugged into the recorder so that I can hear what's being recorded onto the tape, because you always wear your headphones. So a couple of things. You want to make sure to turn your phone. Typically, you have to turn the volume on your phone coming out of your phone pretty far down, because the volume that's coming out of your phone is pretty high, actually. These things just send out a really high level of signal. So you want to turn that down and then adjust the levels, your recording level on your recorder. So it's a little bit complicated because you've got multiple volume controls happening there. But just trust me, you're probably going to have to turn your phone down significantly. Again, monitor what you're recording through the headphone jack. You're still talking into the phone when you're having that phone conversation. So like you can leave that, you can leave the phone on the desk or whatever, and the other person will still be able to hear you, but you're talking into the microphone. The photo has the phone and the recorder right next to each other. Don't do this because you will get interference from the phone. You'll get little either clicks and pops or little buzzes or whatever from the phone that's transmitting information to the cellular network or to your Wi-Fi or whatever. And the last thing is record in stereo so that you are on one side, your recording of you is on one side of the recording, and the phone, what's coming in from the phone, the guest, is on the other side so that you can control those levels independently. Okay, recording Zoom, Skype, etc. You can record these via audio hijack, but I like to use my recorder so that I can mic myself easier. So often I'll run the audio from my computer if I'm using Zoom into my recorder, and then I'll plug my microphone into the other channel on my recorder, and then I'll listen through the headphones from the recorder. And again, record that in stereo so that you can independently control the volume on each of those tracks, because you could adjust the record level on the left side and adjust the record level on the right side, at least on the recorder that I'm using and most of the recorders that you're using. So just to allow yourself maximum control. And also when you're editing, so that you can take out, say, just the just the background sound on the phone, and you don't have to affect what you're saying as well. Because if you record in mono, everything's on one track, and so you can't independently control those things. Remember to coach the other person, the person on the other end of the line, that they should avoid hitting the computer, that they should get the dog out of the room, turn off the AC and the fans and all that stuff. So you just want to make sure that they're in a quiet place. And finally, there's a function in settings on Zoom where you could turn on original sound. And I find that often it sounds a lot better than not turning this on, because Zoom tends to like heavily compress stuff. It does a lot of noise reduction, which affects the way that people, affects the way that people sound over Zoom, and often not in a great way. They do it to get rid of, extraneous noises or whatever, but that often gives us lower quality audio. So I would play around with original sound on Zoom. All right, recording in the field, common problems, mic handling noise. That's when, just the sound of your hand on the grip of the microphone, the cables moving, that sort of thing. So always use a pistol grip or a foam bicycle handlebar grip that you can just slide onto the end of the microphone, the part that you hold, not the business end of the microphone. Watch your cables. I like to coil up just one coil of cable near the bottom of my mic and hold it there so that it's not shaking around and you don't get those little clicks that can come with like the cable waggling around. P-pops, off micness. We already talked about proper mic placement, side diagonal, a few inches from the mouth. This can help you avoid all those P-pops, can help you have a nice present sounding interview. And this even goes for shotguns. You want to get close with a shotgun. Even though it's capable of picking up stuff from further away, you still want the person to be very present on the mic. So get close. And finally, hiss. Again, make sure that you're recording at the proper level. And again, get plenty of room tone. Okay. If there's any questions about that, we'll take that after Leah talks about some editing things. So Leah, I'm going to stop sharing and let you share.
Okay, let me find it. Hold on.
Okay.
The slideshow.
Okay.
Drive. Do I press something to play it? Sorry.
Yeah, there should be a present button in the upper right corner.
Okay, here we go. All right, cool.
Okay.
And let me press share screen. Stop one. Okay. Can you guys see the slideshow?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. All right. So let me, so basic, I'm going to talk about audio editing. So after you get all your sound, what are some good practices when you start editing? So I just want to say to begin with, ours is a medium that is very intimate and I think beautiful and unique. But it's not like a newspaper. It's not like a television news channel. You really have one method and one chance in real time to get your story out. So like Matt was saying, it's just really important that nothing is going to interfere with your message. So in that way, it's important to maintain clear, natural conversational speech without abrupt changes. So just also a reminder, and it's very easy to do when we're, looking at Audition and we're seeing the sound files and, I think your eyes start to come up with ways of editing, but you always have to bring it back to your ears. So I definitely recommend anyone after they're done a mix, while they're laying up a session, play it back and don't look at your screen. Close your eyes, that's the best way you're going to hear anything that just sounds off to you. You're going to essentially turn yourself into the listener and yeah, just notice anything that sounds off. And I have a few resources, links down here from NPR's training site that are really great. I mean, there's so much information on that. So if you do ever have a question, you might want to peruse that. All right, so we're going to get to some basics. Don't work from the server. A lot of times when people start using Audition, they get these extra files that are saved, and they're called like PKF or PFK files. And you're just like, I don't know what that is. And really, all it's doing is saving the visual information of your sound file. So you're not losing anything by not saving them. So I am going to, whoops. See, I'm trying to go back. I'll show you how to, I mean, it says right here how to not save them, but I can also show you guys. It's also important not to create a session with individual clips that you've saved down from the raw. I know this is very tempting for people to do. It's just part of some people's workflow. But if you're putting raw tape into a session, like you have so much flexibility. If you save a clip down, you're like, oh man, I want to like, you know, add that extra phrase that she says after this part. I mean, you have to go back into your raw tape, find where the original clip was, and then, you know, like resave it. So it really saves you time. The way that you create a session, this is sort of the way that they advise you to do this. Voice tracks on track 1, actualities on track 2. If you're unfamiliar with actualities, it means sound bite, you know. Ambient sound and music on tracks 3 and 4, etc. Or track 5, 6, 7, 8 if you're doing like a really crazy mix. Levels should bounce. They should bounce like the recording. When you're recording in your recorder, between 12 and -6. I tend to like to do it on the higher end, -6 dB. That being said, there is a difference between measured sound and perceived sound. So you might have a person in your story that's on the phone, but a phone line is a lot harder to hear when someone's in their car. So you might need to boost that a little bit higher than your voice tracks. So they're going to look louder, but they're going to sound, you know, balanced. And like Matt said, I didn't realize, he says to get a minute of ambi. So I'm going to change my slide on this. But yeah, if you are on the scene, or your story is basically taking place at the scene, you might want to just stand there for 5 minutes and just record. And a lot of people ask me like, but what if there are people talking like over here, or, you know, there's all this stuff going on. I mean, my take is it's all part of the natural environment, and you can turn it down, you know, like in the session. So it's not that distracting, but it's really not a big deal. It's really just like, it's near impossible probably to get like perfect sounding ambi unless you're in a completely quiet room. All right, so organizing your files. After this, I'm gonna go through and actually share my Audition and show you guys how to do this stuff. So when you open a session, Audition creates a folder. It will not automatically save all the files that you are working with. So if you look on the panel on the left side, it's, you know, you see there's like 3 sound files that are all being worked with in this session. Audition's not going to automatically save them in the session, so you have to tell it to. And this is how you do it: file, export, session. You check this box that says save copies of associated files. Or sometimes I like to stay organized. I will actually drag all of the files I'm working with into the folder just to like keep it organized on my desktop, right? All right. So before we get to common distractions, I guess I'm gonna stop my share. on this. I'm sorry, new share. Okay. All right, you guys can see my audition. Let me make sure it's gonna play. Yes. All right. So this is just the normal editor. This is what it looks like when you open Audition. If it doesn't look like this, you might want to go to your workspace or your window button. Can you guys see me pressing the window button, or do I need to share my entire screen here? Let me try and just.
Yeah, we can't see the menus.
All right, so here we go. Now you can, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if it looks weird, this is how you fix it. You go to Window, Workspace. I like mine on radio production. I got my levels down here. I got my my files right here. It's really all I need. So I'm going to open a multi-track session, and I'm just going to call it test. I'm going to save it to my desktop. These are the settings I'm going to use. This is a very important step, and I should probably go back and put it in the slideshow somewhere. If you are working with music or stereo sound, you have to pick stereo at this step in the process for it to actually translate into, like, after you're done with a session and you mix it. If you put stereo music into a mono session, it's going to mix down in mono. You can't change from mono to stereo. You can change from stereo to mono very easily. Or, you know, if you realize that you picked mono to begin with, you can create a whole new session and copy and paste everything into a new session, which is a huge time suck. So I just want to emphasize, this is where you pick stereo. So I'm going to open it up. These are my panels. You can do a lot of fancy stuff with these. We won't get into that. Oops, I called it text. Sorry. So I'm just going to pull some files in. Whoops. Let's see. This is a montage that I put together the other day. This is the.
I was quite excited, but I was very.
These are the voice tracks. So what we do with this stuff, we mix it with music. So I'm going to pull some music in. I'm going to, you know, pull another piece of music in. You can see that Audition is putting my files up here. So this is where your files exist. Now this is where I did check to save copies of associated files in my session. So I'm not really worried about, I don't know if you guys have ever gotten an error message when you're opening up a session and it says it cannot find the file. That's a way to avoid missing your files. But I'm also going to, you guys can see this screen. I'm also going to, okay, I'm going to relabel this montage. I'm also just going to drag all my files that I'm using in here. It's just a really simple way of organizing. Okay, so let's move on to some common audio problems. All right, so this is what I hear. These are things that I hear a lot. And like Matt said, we're not using any examples from Texas Standard or KUT. These are all from reporters across the state. I do not want to shame this is not shaming anyone. We are actually planning to do a workshop with opening it up to people around the state just for them. So just let's not, just don't want to embarrass anyone. All right, so upcut breasts. So basically I'm gonna play you examples of all this stuff, and you're gonna just see if you can recognize them. And I'm actually going to, one second. I'm actually going to share my audition screen so that you guys can hear it a little bit better, because we realized that playing it through the slideshow wasn't really wasn't really translating very well. All right, so here we go. First example.
Holiday says historically, environmental protections haven't existed if you live south of the Trinity River in Dallas. Marsha Jackson can relate.
This is my life. You know, I constantly tell people I'm 62 years old. My doctor had told me that the only way I get better, that property, that pollutant is moved, or either I moved or I eventually die.
Meanwhile, Jackson and the tight-knit Floral Farms community count down the days until Shingle Mountain is gone for good.
All right, so I want you guys to actually really listen to these before I bring it up on my audition. So these are all the places where the breaths are cut short. Let's listen again.
Holiday says historically, environmental protections haven't existed if you live south of the Trinity River in Dallas. Marsha Jackson can relate.
This is my life. You know, I constantly tell people I'm 62 years old. My doctor had told me that the only way I get better, that property, that pollutant is moved, or either I moved or I eventually die.
Meanwhile,
This is also a place I'll get to later. A general rule is to not include, when you're beginning a new voice track, you don't include the breath before you start. We'll get to that later.
The audio and the an audition is slightly out of sync, I think, probably for Zoom watchers, but you can pretty much see on the waveform where those breaths exist. It's where the sound mostly goes away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I didn't realize that.
No.
All right. So let's go to example number 2. Same subject, upcut breaths.
In an instant, everything changed.
My 50-year warranty on my upstairs plumbing went out, and I had a huge brain hemorrhage.
It was a late Friday afternoon in January at his UT office when he stood up.
And my hip started to buckle, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Then I kind of realized what was happening because I looked at my right arm and tried to move it, and it wouldn't move.
Coworkers called 911 and medical help arrived.
All right, so you guys heard all those kind of little like half breaths that were in this guy talking. You know, play it again. Well, maybe I shouldn't play it if it's out of sync, but.
And my hip started to buckle, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Then I kind of realized what was happening because I looked at my right arm and tried to move it, and it wouldn't move.
Coworker.
Right, so that's another example. One more. This one might be a little harder. There's only one instance in it.
He says mild hospitalization doesn't typically cause PTSD.
But I think COVID is a very different type of phenomena. They're in rooms by themselves. Often they're not allowed to have visitors. People generally don't go into the room, so they're by themselves in almost social isolation in this hospital bed, wondering what's going to happen to them.
He says mild hospitalization doesn't typically.
All right, so this is where the breath is, or the upcut breath.
They're in rooms by themselves. Often they're not allowed.
It's right here before the word often. So when I'm listening to this for the Texas Standard, well, let me just play an actual full breath. I mean, the next one is an actual full breath.
Often they're not allowed to have visitors. People generally.
You hear how there's kind of like this slight like millisecond pause before he starts speaking again. That's sort of how a natural breath flows, right? It's like you're not talking like you're not talking like that. It's not natural. So what I would often do for Texas Standard is just literally just separate it a little bit. Maybe like put a little fade on.
In rooms by themselves. Often they're not allowed to have visitors. People, they're in rooms by themselves. Often they're not allowed to have visitors.
Right. It's just giving it that much more space to where it sounds natural. All right. So I think that, let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to go like back and forth with this crazy like slideshow and all that stuff. All right. So sorry, guys. We are going to get to upcuts or ending a clip abruptly next. All right.
On top of that,
sorry. Let me go back to my audition. All right. This is example number 1.
And she doesn't want to be part of something that she thinks has the potential to put lives at risk.
It is a super spreader event, in my opinion. And we know that, unfortunately, our Republican counterparts don't take it seriously, but I do. And we are going to not be there.
Her fellow Democrat, Michelle Beckley, represents Southeast Denton County. And she...
All right, so that was example number 1 for the upcutting a clip. And if you couldn't tell already, it happens after.
And we are going to not be there.
Her fellow Democrat.
Right? I mean, she's obviously not done speaking. It sounds a little clipped. In order to avoid things like this, I mean, I feel like people do this a lot because they're trying to like cram a lot into like a little bit of time. So they're trying to save time essentially, but it's really saving like a very, very marginal amount of time to, I don't know, take out the 2 seconds that might come after what she says, just so she can finish a thought, right? And I don't know what came after this. I don't have the raw tape. So let's go to example number 2 for upcut.
In a city like Houston with no zoning, they frequently affect residents, damaging homes and in some cases taking lives.
People were asking me in the months after the explosion, what's going to be done, what's going to happen, are we making any changes to make sure that this won't happen again?
Houston City Council member Amy Peck represents the district.
All right, so that actually was a real ugly clip there after the word again. And you can sort of tell that a lot of times producers will do this. They'll try to bring in their next voice track like really quick to try and like disguise it. But for me, it just like makes it that much better or that much worse. So, all right, let's get to the next example. Oops.
President Trump expanded a proclamation in June, keeping certain work visa.
Sorry, here, let me try it again.
President Trump expanded a proclamation in June, keeping certain work visa holders from entering the country.
My world broken in pieces when I read the proclamation. It just was unbelievable.
That was Babu back in July.
So you can hear it after unbelievable, right?
Was unbelievable.
That was,
and you can kind of fix it, right? I mean, ideally, like I would like to hear maybe a little bit more after he says that, but I understand why she wanted to end it at unbelievable. So I'm literally just gonna like put a fade on it.
Unbelievable.
And it just makes it a little bit cleaner.
Was unbelievable.
That was Babu.
Okay. All right, so I'm not going to go back to the slideshow. I'm going to play you guys the next sort of distraction as I see it, and that is when you sort of cut too much within a soundbite, within an actuality. You're trying to like, you know exactly what you want this person to say and are trying to cut it for them to say it like that, but like it really just doesn't work. All right, here we go.
No spoilers, but what was disembodied becomes physical and musical and personal.
It's going to blur the lines between this more virtual work that we've become accustomed to and the traditional live performance work that we've all loved for centuries.
Composer Nigel Newton says he was given complete creative freedom. The Karazana did offer some general ideas.
Loneliness was the first adjective that he gave, so that was the primary drive, but then there's a bit of joy and kind of all the things that I felt in my time in quarantine these last.
All right, so
my God, that was a mess.
Yeah. So, I mean, to avoid that, I mean, just let the person talk. Just, I mean, if there's like, I actually like I think there's value in having like ums and uhs and repetitive words because it gives the listener time to like let the content sink in, and it really is just part of natural speech. I'm not saying to never clean that stuff up because some people can, get really rambly and whatnot, but as a general rule, just kind of try and leave it natural. All right, next example.
Mark Jones is a political scientist at Rice University.
If we went back to something similar, it would be probably when Democrats were taking back control of the state from carpetbagger Republicans.
So did you guys hear it after probably?
Mark Jones is a political scientist at Rice University.
If we went back to something similar, it would be probably when Democrats were taking back control of the state from carpetbagger.
So I don't know what came after the word probably, but I'm betting it was something like probably, I don't know. But yeah, let's go to the next example.
On top of that, the world is undergoing what is expected to be a decades-long shift away from Exxon's main product, fossil fuels.
Houston's not going to stop being a world oil capital, but the business is changing really rapidly.
That's Steve Cull. He literally wrote the book on ExxonMobil called Private Empire.
And what kind of long-term commitment companies like Exxon are going to make to the way they now operate globally, I think is something that everybody's going to be rethinking.
Cull, as well as many...
Okay, so this example is when tracks and acts are too tight together. I don't know if you guys caught that. Sorry, I didn't explain that we were sort of listening to something a little bit new. For me, I do think this is distracting, and I do think that it's often, it can be very subjective. Sometimes you might want to come out of a soundbite or actuality really quick to do for some kind of effect. But in general, I just like a little bit more space. And this is sort of a very common distraction that can happen when you are just editing with your eyes and not editing with your ears. Because, you know, she probably, again, I don't want to shame people, but, you know, let's say these are her voice tracks. She's sort of visually seeing that, you know, this is where she stops her voice track and this is where the soundbite should come in. Like it makes sense visually, but it just doesn't sound the best. Let me just play it one more time.
Not being a world oil capital, but the business is changing really rapidly.
That's Steve Cull. He literally wrote the book on ExxonMobil called Private Empire.
And what kind of long-term commitment companies like Exxon are going to make to the way they now operate globally, I think is something that everybody's going to be rethinking.
Cull, as well as many...
All right, so that's that example. I want to show you an example of something from our show. This is an example of something that was cut a little too tight within the clip.
There's this district in Paris, and it's like the traditional Jewish district. There we learned about a school teacher who saved some Jewish people.
All right, so after the word there, this is what it sounded like when I was able to get the raw tape and find out what actually happened after she said the word there.
There's this district in Paris, and it's like the traditional Jewish district. There we learned about a school teacher who saved some Jewish people.
Right, so you can tell that she's stumbling a little bit, but it just sounds a lot more natural. All right, sorry. I feel like I'm taking up way too much time than I thought. So maybe we should get to fixing phone tape. What do you think, Matt? What do you guys think? It's 1:45.
Yeah, let's get to phone tape so we can
All right.
have some time for questions. We can go a little beyond 2 if people are able to stick around, but yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to get to... Oops, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. Basic phone EQing. Can you guys see the slideshow again? There might be a setting to fix your phone tape under favorites, but it might not work for everything. So this is the way to do it. You use the parametric equalizer under the effects, filter, and EQ function. You're clicking the high pass and low pass buttons when the screen pops up. High pass basically means you're letting the high frequencies pass, so you're cutting out the low end. Low pass means you're letting the lower frequencies pass, so you're cutting out the high end. It's kind of a little confusing, but it makes sense when you think about it. So let me show you again how to fix some phone tape. All right, so this is a feature.
Acosta became beloved and achieved a kind of greatness by virtue of those who looked up to him.
He knew lots of musicians like
Oops, I'm sorry.
Handmade.
So this is the phone tape I'm gonna fix. I'm actually just gonna pull it on here.
Store.
They specialized in handmade stringed instruments like guitars, bajo sextos, lutes, sold sheet music.
All right, we're gonna ignore the edits. So I'm gonna highlight this piece of tape, right? I'm gonna go to Effects, Filter and EQ, Parametric Equalizer. This box is gonna come up. It's gonna look crazy confusing. You basically wanna make sure that these buttons are pressed, the high pass and the low pass. This setting doesn't, I mean, it's basically changing how sharply you're cutting off a frequency at this point. So if I'm gonna put it at 48, the line's gonna get, you know, straighter because you're gonna make a more drastic change or more exact change, I guess. But I really just leave it on 30. I think that's fine. So for phone tape, this is how I basically fix it. I press this button down here. This means it's going to play, it's going to loop playback for everything that I've highlighted. So I'm just going to, just have that playing so I can really get a sense of what is going to sound better. I'm also going to want to have this green power button on to allow you to hear the fix versus the not fix, the not EQ'd. All right, so this is all in the slideshow, sort of like the numbers that you're going to want to set it between, but I'm going to just sort of try this out.
They specialized in handmade stringed instruments like guitars, bajo sextos, lutes, sold sheet music. They specialized in handmade stringed instruments like guitars, bajo sextos, lutes, sold sheet music. They specialized in handmade.
Right, so I'm looping this. I'm sort of toggling back between what it sounds like with EQing, without EQing. I'm going to decide that this cleans it up pretty good, and I'm going to click apply.
Store.
They specialized in handmade stringed instruments like guitars, bajo sextos, lutes, sold sheet music.
Okay, so another thing that I would recommend is before you start breaking up a sound file to put in your session, if you have some phone tape that doesn't sound good, I would fix that entire raw file, before you even start breaking it up. Just like get it done. So this is an example of like a raw Q&A recording that we did the other day. I like to put mine on the show spectral frequency display so I can kind of see where David is and where the guest is. So yeah, I'm just gonna like.
So the situation in Lake Waco was really unique in that we caught the zebra.
So this isn't a terrible phone line, but you know,
mussels very early when they're in a very localized area around one boat ramp, one cove. And we also had...
All right, so also, you guys probably won't have to worry about this, but when you're fixing phone tape, if David comes in or if you come in while the person's talking...
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Where was that?
Reproduction, which is important.
So this little like after you fix the phone tape, it's gonna fix that little too. So I'm just gonna sort of grab.
So the situation in Lake Waco was really unique in that we caught the zebra mussels very early when they're in a very localized area around one boat ramp, one cove.
All right, so I'm going to apply that. I'm going to fix the rest of it. All right, so yeah, just giving you guys some basics on that. I'm going to show you how to fix P-pops now.
A couple of years ago, there was a photograph published on Twitter of a group of radiation oncologists in the radiation treatment room at MD Anderson.
All right, so this is our commentator, W.F. Strong. I don't think he would mind if I'm playing his tape. These are pretty egregious P-pops. So I don't think we're going to be able to get it out completely, but let's try. You're going to use the same tool, the parametric equalizer, but this time you're just going to use the high pass filter because you want to take out the low frequencies. The P-pops happen, wind noise happens on the lower end of the frequency spectrum. So I'm just going to like maybe set it here.
A couple of years ago, there was a photograph published on Twitter of a group of radiation oncologists in the radiation treatment room. A couple of years ago, there was a photograph published on Twitter of a group of radiation oncologists in the radiation treatment room. A couple of years ago, there was a photograph published on Twitter of a group of radiation oncologists in...
All right, so that's a little bit better.
That's a tough one too, because he has such a deep voice that you're cutting out the low frequencies, and you know, some of the appeal of his voice is that it lives in those really low frequencies. But
right, I was going to say that you do need to be careful not to dramatically change someone's voice, and sadly in this case, well, I'm actually we've actually like told him not to record so close to the microphone, so it has gotten better. But yeah, you can't. I mean, you
that's
can
the whole
take out-
garbage in, garbage out thing.
Exactly. Another way to get rid of P-pops, and I don't recommend this as something to rely on, is to actually notch them out.
A couple of years ago, there was a photograph published on Twitter.
Right, so I couldn't get out that those little extra things.
Graph published on.
I'm just gonna try to notch it out. I'm gonna just zoom in. I would also recommend getting a mouse with the little scrolly thing, so you can zoom in really easily like this, and just see what happens if I can just notch it out a little.
There was a photograph published on Twitter.
So that's a little bit better. You can quickly make mistakes doing this though.
Twitter of a group of radiation oncologists in the radiation treatment room at MD Anderson, all women.
Right, so you can kind of, I just want to, this is what a P-pop looks like, if you weren't.
Opening previously closed doors inside.
It's kind of like this crazy jagged little thing. So you can try to notch them out. I would try to EQ things first though. All right, let me do a wind noise demonstration. A lot of it's the same thing. So this is a story that Jill put together, beautifully laid up, tracks, acts, ambi. I love it. You can also zoom in and zoom out over here to make things a little bit, apologies if this is a little too complicated for people, but so she's got this sound down here that's just it's a little windy. There's a little wind interference.
Water.
Sometimes even using a wind screen isn't going to get out all the wind.
Water. The altar features many of the traditional Dia de los Muertos offerings. Pan de Muerta, the traditional...
You can kind of hear that little rumble there. I'm going to go to this raw file by, it is over here. It looks like it's right here. But when you're in the session, oops, if you double click on the raw file, it's going to bring you to the file. It'll actually just bring you to the section that you're clicking on, but if you zoom out, you can see the whole file. So I'm going to like highlight a section of this where I can see there's a lot of wind noise.
You can do it. I can talk to you while you're putting things on.
guess just to kind of like give, I work for radio, so people are solely listening. Can you kind of describe some of the features? You can do it. I can talk to you while you're putting things on.
I'll just set it around 100.
So I guess.
And then I'm gonna like highlight the whole file, double click on it, and just apply. And it's gonna change what the sound file looks like dramatically. But yeah, it's just gonna sound that much better. Hold on. Let me find a part where. And the same thing with this one.
Not flailing around and hurting itself. And then you always put the tag on this cell, which is the center.
That's actually not very windy, but yeah. So when you EQ the file, like this is the file I just EQ'd, it's going to look a lot different. So you're going to have to make some volume adjustments. And anyway, so that's an example of wind noise. And I think all of this is in the slides. I think that's all I got. I'm sorry if I ran through a ton of stuff or if I was super confusing in any way. I guess we can, what do you think, Matt? Open it up to questions. Anything anyone was confused about or have other questions about?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go for it.
And this, I've never recorded from my iPhone before. And so I was a little confused how you hook that up to your recorder. Maybe I just don't have the right cords to do that with.
Yeah, so let me see here. Okay, so what I use is, so first you need this little dongle guy. If you've got an iPhone that was made in the last 5 years, instead of a headphone jack, it has a lightning jack. So this little dongle plugs into the bottom, turns it into a regular headphone jack. And then what I've got is an 1/8" plug, a headphone plug that plugs into there. And on the other end of that, well, this one's a little bit more complicated. This one actually goes to an RCA, and then I have an adapter that turns it into a 1/4" jack, and that goes into the middle of. Can you see it? In the middle of the plug in the bottom of the Zoom. You could use a lot of other different plugs for this. You could go 1/8" to XLR.
And I think I think when we were transitioning to home almost a year ago, I had Jake order a bunch more of those. So I may have some at my desk. I definitely have one of the extra little dongles sitting in my hand right now at my home, the little iPhone one. So Marissa, I can try to piece together that part of a kit for you.
Yeah, that would be great. That's what I'm missing is the dongle thing.
And I think, Jake, do we have some more at the station?
We do. Just y'all just let me know if you need them.
Awesome.
We may need to order some more, but we definitely have a few.
Do you know if we have any of the mini to XLR left?
I believe so.
That's just kind of the easiest way to go from that dongle. But anyway.
Depending on your recorder, yes. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. And I have another question about audio hijack. How do you record yourself in those phone calls? I thought it was only recording what was coming out of the computer.
In audio hijack?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the downside to audio hijack is there may be a way to arrange it so that I don't know if it's capable of recording from two sources at the same time. So that's why it's not ideal to record through audio hijack. If you're doing a Zoom call or something like that, it's much better to plug your computer into your Zoom recorder, take the output from the computer, send that to one channel of the Zoom recorder, and plug a mic into the other channel of the Zoom recorder. And that way you can capture both sides of the conversation.
Audio hijack can do multiples if you have a way to get both inputs into the computer. So if you have an interface and you can plug your mic into it and then go to the computer, audio hijack will let you make a session where you can get both halves and have them as different sides of the stereo session if you want.
Right. Yeah. That's going to require some extra hardware though. So
right. But I'm saying if you have that, I mean, if somebody's recording at home and they have to have an interface in order to do that, you could use that same gear to record to hijack.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's see here. Laura asked a question. What happens if I just plug in one side of a stereo cord? It works, but is there something I'm missing? Can you explain that a little more, Laura?
Started my video, but not my audio. Meant to do the opposite. So I have the same setup that you do, but with the dongle and the stereo cord that I'm plugging into my Zoom recorder. But I don't have a thing that like you then had like both ends of the stereo cord went into another cord.
I see. Yeah.
So I just pick either I'm like red or black, which one? It's like roulette. So I just pick one and it seems to work fine, but I don't know if that's long-term messing something else up.
No, that's totally fine. What's coming out of the phone is mono anyway. So the same thing is coming out of both sides to that stereo plug.
Okay.
So it doesn't really matter which side you plug in.
Okay, that makes sense.
If I can, unless you're recording a stereo source, but if you're on a phone call, that's not stereo.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Matt, I have a question about, you mentioned that people hear you through the phone. I thought when you plug the mic into the recorder, they were hearing whatever you said through the mic.
No. So what happens is with iPhones, so you can plug, like if you plug headphone, like Apple headphones into an Apple iPhone, the plug is actually, so this has one ring on it. It has two black rings on it. The Apple iPhone, the Apple headphone jack has three rings on it. For lack of a better thing, there's a left and a right output. And then that third ring is the microphone input. So it will actually sense whether or not you've plugged in a 3-ring jack. And so if you've only plugged in a regular headphone jack, the mic on the phone itself is actually still active.
Oh, okay. And that's what the person is hearing and not the input from your microphone?
Correct.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question. So I have to record a lot of interviews we use the Zoom because the hosts want the video aspect of that as well. Like my biggest problem is like it's because the artist is always like either on their iPhone with like they may or may not have headphones and they're talking into their like Apple microphone, or they're just talking into their computer.
Yeah.
Into their phone. And like the levels are always like
wonky,
fluctuating up and down, right? And so you have to boost some parts of their thing or like turn down parts of the things, like if they're laughing or whatever. Like what are like best practices to like either help that beforehand or like in the like editing process to like even it out? Like do you even it out before to the raw footage or like when you've edited it?
So a couple of things. So like whenever possible, they should be wearing headphones. just to remove the possibility of you echoing back from their side. And the second part of that is I would encourage turning on original sound in the Zoom settings, which will get rid of all this compression and noise cancellation.
Yeah,
it
that's,
doesn't.
I already do that.
You already do that? Yeah.
Are you talking about when you're mixing it, like how to, like the
Yeah.
levels are all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know if there's. I mean, like, yeah, they, like you say, garbage in, garbage out. Like, I want to negate as much as possible before, but then, like, I also am like working with artists that it's like you got 10 minutes and I'm on my fucking phone and doing like a run of these. So it's like.
I mean, I would use a limiter or the speech volume leveler. They're both plugins that will kind of smooth out the peaks and valleys in the loudness or the levels of the recording. So that can be a way to automate it.
I personally, I don't really like the volume leveling. I feel like you can actually hear what the computer is doing to like boost here and lower here. Like you can kind of hear the changes. So hard limiting is a good tool. And by plugin, Matt, you mean like the effects basically.
Like putting it in the rack.
Oh, right. Yeah. Like the old days.
Right.
But in Audition under effects, you can go to amplitude and compression, and I can show you this. And there's a option for hard limiting. And I don't really know a lot about getting those. I have a setting that I use for everything on Texas Standard for just computer and phone tape. But there is a setting under there that's just for light hard limiting. And that one might be a good one to start with.
Would you do that to the raw footage or like highlight and do it after you've edited?
I would probably do it on the raw. Because if you're
keep it consistent.
Right. You can also, I mean, it's very tedious, but when you're working in a session, you can like adjust the volume, the little volume nodules.
Yeah, that's usually what I do, but it's like a lot. I didn't know if there was like, I'm just, winging it, trying to remember my audition classes from, a bajillion.
It'd be fun to look at your specific situation and kind of troubleshoot that one.
That's another thing. If you guys
I'd love
want
to hear Jake's thoughts on that one too.
Yeah, because Jake helped me afterwards too.
Yeah, I was actually going to jump in. What I've been doing, because you're still recording via Zoom, right? So
yeah,
it's not,
I'm
it's
hoping
not something
like changing that too.
That would be awesome. But essentially what Leah's described is pretty much what I've been doing on that. The thing with limiting on a super compressed audio signal, I mean, limiting is just super hard compression. It's just saying, this is the loudest it's going to get, and I'll drop it by that much. So everything, all the small parts rise, essentially is what happens. So when you're limiting something that's already compressed like Zoom audio, you kind of have to be careful because it can get crunchy real fast. So just sort of use your ears on that. But that is the quickest, dirtiest way to just get real loud things, real soft things in the same ballpark. And if I can, Leah, one suggestion I would like to make for P-pops that I have to do for myself when I read underwriting is if you do the low pass or high pass, I get those confused too, just on the P, instead of like if it's WF Strong, you're not taking all the bass out of his voice, just do it where you would try to cut it out. And that usually takes care of it too. So
yeah, that's a great idea. So it sounds a little tedious, but
oh, it is.
And if you guys have, I just wanted to say, if you guys have any specific questions at any time when you're working on stuff, please reach out. We can do one-on-one Zoom sessions. It's kind of hard to, teach all this stuff without being in the offices. but there are ways. And I just wanted to, Jackie asked me a question. She said, does anybody ever fade down but leave a little bit of the rest of a sentence to avoid an upcut? And yes, that is a method that people do a lot. Not a whole lot. I don't have an example with me. I think it sounds best when like someone is just like maybe a rambly talker, and maybe you have a little bit, maybe you're like at a play, like you're at a convention or something, and there's noise anyway, and you can kind of, before the actual soundbite is like in the clear, you can kind of fade up a little bit on it and fade it out. I think it does sound a little weird if you just have voice tracks and actualities and you're fading down on a cut. But yes, it is a method that people do. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, I think in context you can make that sound better, like especially if you're like, yeah, like Leah said, if you have some ambience, or if you also fade in the beginning, like if
right,
like, you know, if you can set it up with like, I caught up with this person as they were walking around the floor of the convention or whatever, and like maybe you hear a little bit of them, and then you say a little something else and they kind of go underneath you, and then so you can, you know, I guess in a simple situation, you know, where you don't have all of those extra tools or elements, it can be difficult. But yeah, I think it's a technique that should be used sparingly.
All right, thanks guys. Hope it made sense. We'll share the slide deck, and you know, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out. Even if you're like, does this sound good? I can't tell, you know? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah, and if you have specific questions for like future workshops, then please let us know.
Yeah, we're going to be doing more advanced parts of these where we're going to get into some really nitty-gritty stuff, nerd stuff. So
nerd stuff. all are welcome, of course.
Here's a suggestion for the gear industry: high cut and low cut.
You know, they name stuff like that way too.
Yeah, I do.
And then that gets even more confusing.
It's just more straightforward to do it.
It is. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I have a dumb question.
No dumb questions.
Cordless mics, like, or is the quality just like not?
I don't really know much of. Jake might know.
In my opinion, cordless mics for broadcast are great until they stop working in the middle of a broadcast, because someone forgot to change the batteries, or they all have switches on them, so inevitably someone will turn it off. And the problem is they're only cordless until you get to the part where you're receiving it, and then that has to be plugged into power,
right,
as well as an XLR cable to get to whatever you're.
That's what I was thinking is,
yeah.
Like if the Marantzes had some kind of, like, if there was a mic for like a portable.
I mean, you'd have to have battery power on both ends, the transmit and the receive, and that's just, I mean, if people come into 1A with the cordless mic, unless they absolutely insist, I'll tell them that we prefer not to, just because it's always cool until it's not.
Mm-hmm.
They do make mics that have recorders built into them. I can't say I've used one in like 10 years, but I don't know, back then they were pretty cool.
Yeah. I tested one of those like 10 years ago too. I guess they still have them around.
Yeah.
I'm bringing back the Mr. Microphone.
My recorder has a mic built in, and I think it sounds pretty decent.
Yeah.
You know, I heard that when I was at Morning Edition, when Steve Inskeep went to Iran, he would that's the mic he would use because he had to be like really, discreet about it. So
the stereo mics on those new Zooms, I mean, at least on like a room sound, are really, really good. I mean, for a voice track, you want to get something closer to your face, but they sound pretty awesome.
Just got to watch out for the handling noise.
Yep.
All right. Well, have a great day, you guys. Thanks for coming.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.